Hello and welcome to Chapter 15, the final chapter in your Python programming course. Chapter 15 deals with a really unique topic in plotting data. If you're interested in getting into any data analytics or data science, then Python is a great tool for plotting data and doing data analytics, things like that. Chapter 15 in the book deals with a library called Matplotlib. Matplotlib has quite a few steps. You have to have like Visual Studio installed and a bunch of other things. So it's a chapter I want you to read. You'll be counted as far as participation, but we are not going to use the Matplotlib library. We are going to use something else. So if you do not have Turtle installed or the tkinter right here, you can get that from within our work along. But what we are going to do is we are going to create a plot that tracks data changes. So here's our activity for today, and this video is going to be a multi-part because there's about 100 lines or so of code. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is you're asked to plot the Dow Jones Industrial Average, DJIA, from the beginning of the 20th century to the end of the 20th century. And for the most part, that's because that's how much data I could find on it in the format I was looking for. You're to show the growth of the Dow Jones Industrial Average over the 20th century. Due to complexity, like I said, we're not going to use the Matplotlib library, so we're going to use Turtle and tkinter. What we want to do in our activity is we're going to open a file, we're going to read the data. There's going to be a date field and an amount field. And then we're going to place that into a list, and then the date format has to be set up. So we're going to format the date, and then we're going to calculate a maximum date. What's the largest date we've got, and the maximum amount, and then total number of days, things like that. We're going to do all that, and then we're going to draw a window to the proper size. We're going to base that off of our max date and max amount, and then we're going to draw a graphic of the data and then close the file. Always have to close your file once you open it. So like I said, it's going to be multi-part because there's quite a bit of code in this one, and we're actually going to break it into multiple pieces. So let's start with our PyDev project and Chapter 15, work along. And I'm just going to do Python 3.4, make sure my SRC folder is created. Okay, so here's our project here. Here's our SRC folder. The first thing I want to do is I want to actually go get the data. And the reason I wanted to create the project first is I'm going to put the data in the SRC folder. So if I go back to Canvas, up here it says download work along file here before you start and place it in the project's SRC folder. I will click on that. It will open it up. You can right click or click on this link here. And I'm just going to say save link as. And then I want to navigate to my work along folder, which is on my USB drive, Python workspace, and I'll find my project, my SRC folder, and then here I just want to name it DJIA for Dow Jones Industrial Average -100. So it's 100 years of data. And then we can go ahead and save that. If you look, here's all the data. Here's what it looks like. This first part is the date and then the value. So the date starts off with the first two are year, the second two are month, and the last two are the day. And then $66.61, that's the amount. We come all the way down, if it'll load, we'll leave that load for now. But now let's go back to Eclipse. So now in here, in my project, I want to right click and I'm going to go New, and we'll go PyDev module, and we can call this plotting. Plotting, because that's what we're going to do with it. And let's create our module. Okay, so now that our project is created, let's start off with a comment, and we're going to import libraries. Import our libraries, and the first thing I want to import is I'm going to import the turtle. Importing the turtle may be different based on the version of Python you're using. Sometimes it's a capital T, sometimes it's a lowercase t. If you're using version 2, then it's a capital T. Version 3, I believe all of them are lowercase t. And then we also want to import our date time. So this is going to allow us to be able to format the date time. Remember when I showed you it was the first two elements were year, the second two were month, and the last two were day. So we're going to need that so that need to know that so that when we break that apart, we can create a date out of it. And then I want to create my my turtle object. So let's throw in create turtle object, and we'll do that by saying t equals. So our object's name is going to be t, just for simplicity's sake, and I'm going to go turtle lowercase t dot turtle uppercase t, and then open and closing paren, and that will be our turtle. Besides creating our turtle, we are also going to open our file. So underneath our turtle, let's create our file. We'll call it file equals, and then it's just open, opening paren, double quote, and if you remember the name, it was Dow Jones Industrial Average DJIA-100.txt, because it's a text file, double quote, comma, and then we want to open it in a read format or mode, so we want to hit that with an R to say it's read only. Okay, so we're going to read the data from the file. Okay, so now we've got it open, and now we're going to set up some variables. So let's set up variables, set variables. And the variables I want to set up are going to be max, DJIA for Dow Jones Industrial Average. So max Dow Jones Industrial Average, to start off at 0, because we want to figure out what's the largest value so we can appropriately size our screen. And then we're going to go with a start date to figure out what the date is that we have, and we're going to default that to a specific value. So let's go with date time dot date time opening paren year first, so 1900, comma 1, comma 1 closing paren. So we're setting our date time to January 1st, 1900, and then we have to figure out our max date. So our max date is going to be, to start off with, our start date. because we have to work through and find what the max date is. This is where we're going to start working through and start to find these values. We have to go through all of that data. There's 75 or so hundred lines of data, which is actually pretty small. So what we want to do is we'll put a comment in here, loop through data to find max. What do I find max? The max values and dates. All right, and we'll use a for loop for that, for line in, and then we're going to say file, colon. So what that's going to do, that's going to go and grab our file and read each line in. And if you remember the format that we saw, I don't know if, oh, that's right, I jumped out of that. The format that we saw this in was the first part was the date and then the amount, and then this is date and this is amount, and so on all the way down. So it's going to read each individual line on that for us. So we want to read that line, and then we're going to add this to a list. So I'm going to say LST is a temporary list holder, line.split, open and closing paren. So the reason I put line.split in there is I want to split my line at a certain special character. And the special character is a comma. So I'm going to go double quote, comma, double quote, and then closing paren. So it's going to take those values, the two values, the date and the amount, and it's going to put them in a list at location index number 0 and 1. So we're going to add that in there. And then we're going to go date string, str, equals LST square bracket 0 square bracket. So it's grabbing the first element, and that was the first item that was in there. And then we'll go Dow Jones Industrial Average, DJIA, is equal to, and this is going to be a float. We're pulling it in. It's a string coming in. Anything coming in on text file is a string, but we want to convert it to a float. And it's going to be LST opening square bracket, and that's at position 1. Closing square bracket, closing paren. So now we've grabbed those two values, we threw them into a list. Now the date is not in any special format, it's just 6 characters in a row. So I want to create a year, a month, and a day variable. So year is going to equal an integer. We're going to cast it to an integer, and we're going to say date string, and we're going to grab, so using a square bracket, we're going to grab a certain section of it, starting at position 0, colon, going to position 1. So 1 less than 2. We want the next 2 characters, so 1 less than 2 is what we're going to grab in there. So that's going to assign those two values, those two numbers, to year. And then month is going to equal, again, int, opening paren, date string, and square bracket. Now we have to start at position 2, and we want to go 2 more up. So we're going to go 2 to 4. 1 less than 4 is what we're going to grab. So this is going to be at position 2 and 3, which will be the month. Closing bracket, closing paren, and then the day. The day is, again, int, date string, square bracket, and now we're going to grab the last 2 values out of there. So those are going to start at position 4, colon, and go to 6. which means that it's going to grab one less than 6. So it's going to grab all those values and it's going to assign them as integers to that. And then we're going to figure out our date is going to be formatted by date time. Date time. Remember we did that earlier when we set the initial start date. So date time, and then of course we're going to put this into a special format. One thing we have to do though is year was only 2 characters. So where I am creating my year, I'm going to add in 1900. Since the data is all from the 20th century, I'm going to take whatever the 2-digit value is and add 1900 to it to give me 1900 and something. Okay, if we were doing for 2000, we would do 2000 and something. Okay, so I now have 1932, 1958, 1999, whatever the date is for the year. So now in my date time line where I'm trying to assign a date, I'm going to put in year, comma, month, comma, day. And that is going to create a date for me. Now here's where we find out where our maxes are. I want to find out what my max values are. So my maximum, remember we set it above, our maximum Dow Jones Industrial Average is 0. So now I'm going to say if DJIA, the value we're pulling in from our string, is greater than max DJIA, then I want to assign max DJIA the value of DJIA. So I'm taking the value that I'm pulling in and I'm comparing it to what I've got set for my max because I want to find the largest one. And we're going to do the same thing for date. So if date is greater than my start date, I'm sorry, max date. If it's greater than my max date, then my max date is going to equal the date. So we want to do that so we can find those largest values. Okay, so now when I'm done reading it, I'm going to left justify all the way over. I now need to calculate the number of days because I want to see how big of a plot I need to make. So let's go with a comment here that says calculate number of days to plot. Okay, so we calculate the number of days to plot, and we're going to say date diff equals max date minus start date. So that's going to give us a number of days difference. And then I'm going to figure out the total days. And that's going to equal date diff dot days. And that's going to return to me an integer. Okay. So from there, there's one more thing we're going to do. We're going to start setting up our screen. And that's why we're going through all of this, is to set up our screen size. So let's put a comment in here. Let's set up screen size. And in here, we're going to say screen. We're making an object, calling it screen, is going to be T, going back to our turtle, dot get screen. And that is creating our screen. And then we're going to set the size to it. So screen dot set world coordinates, and it's going to ask us to set where we want to set this thing up at. So I'm going to start off with -500 because I want to make room for, that's my X lower left corner. And I want to make room for all of our data and everything else we're going to add to it. So a -1500, and then I'm going to take that's our starting point, I'm going to take the total days, and I'm going to add 5,000. These are all pixels. These are all pixel sizes. And then I'm going to take the max DJIA, and I'm going to add 1,500 to that. Okay, so that's just setting up my screen. I'm going to cut this off here. We'll continue this in the next video.